The night Al Pacino stood up and left Fallon's set without speaking a single word, Al Pacino stood up in the middle of the interview. Not because the segment was over. Not because someone called cut. He put both hands on the armrests of the chair, pushed himself to standing, and walked off the set. No explanation. No gesture toward Jimmy. No acknowledgement of the cameras or the audience. 300 people watched him go. The sound of his footsteps was the only thing in the room. Jimmy Fallon did not move for 4 full seconds. He sat at the desk with his hands flat on the surface and watched the direction Al Pacino had gone, and when he finally looked back at the audience, his face was not performing anything. It was just his face. It was a Monday night at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. The Tonight Show crowd had been loud and warm since the opening. Al Pacino was 82 that year, and the audience had received him the way audiences receive men who have earned the right to simply exist in a room, not with the screaming that greets pop stars, but with the kind of sustained, rising applause that means we know what you have given us. The interview had been good. Stories about early New York, about the actor's studio, about the particular comedy of being old in an industry obsessed with what comes next. He was relaxed in the way men only become relaxed when they have stopped needing anything from the room. The segment producer said afterward she had never seen the set feel so settled so early in an interview, and she had been doing this for 14 years. Then Jimmy reached into a folder and placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. Not a photograph, not a prop. A piece of paper, standard size, with a photocopy of a handwritten letter on it, the original too fragile to bring to set, the archivist had said. The handwriting was small and careful. The date at the top was October 1969. Al Pacino looked at it. He did not touch it. He leaned forward in his chair slightly, the way a person leans towards something they are not sure they are ready to look at directly. His hands, which had been loose on his knees, went still. He read the first line. Jimmy Fallon watched his face. Al Pacino read the first line again. "Where did you get this?" he said. It was not a question. The inflection was flat, precise, directed somewhere that was not the desk and was not the audience and was not the cameras. "Al," Jimmy said quietly. Al Pacino stood up and walked off the set without a single word. The entire studio froze. 300 people held their breath. No one spoke. The band did not play. For 6 full seconds, the set was empty in the way a room becomes empty when the person who filled it has just left. Not quiet, not still, but hollowed. Was it anger? Was it illness? Was it something the letter had said? He was 82, and the walk had not been the walk of a man who was unwell. It had been deliberate, contained. The walk of a man going somewhere specific to do something necessary. His voice did not carry back from the wings. The microphone on his lapel had gone with him. The entire studio froze, and nobody on the production staff knew what to do next. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1969. Al Pacino wasn't always Al Pacino. The face on the poster, the voice in the dark theater, the man whose performances have been studied in classrooms for 50 years. In the autumn of 1969, he was 29 years old and living in a 4th-floor walk-up on West 46th Street in Manhattan with a broken radiator and a role in an off-Broadway production closing in 2 weeks, regardless of reviews, because the producer had run out of money. He had been in New York for 8 years. He had studied at the actor's studio. He had done the things you were supposed to do. He had also, in 8 years, not broken through in any way that paid the rent. The first serious question about whether this was going to work had started sitting with him in the mornings before he got out of bed. His neighbor on the 4th floor, was a man named Raymond Cole. Raymond was 66 years old, a retired city postal worker from the Bronx who had moved to West 46th Street 7 years earlier after his wife passed. Because the apartment was cheaper than the one they had shared and he had not seen any reason to keep the extra rooms. He had spent 31 years sorting and delivering mail, and had read in that time more letters than most people would read in several lifetimes. Not private letters, the ones in the envelopes, but the postcards, the things left unsealed by accident or habit. He had read enough human correspondence to have formed precise opinions about how people said things, what they meant when they said them, and what they were too afraid to say at all. He had also, for reasons he considered private, read every significant work of American drama printed before 1960. They had met in the stairwell on a Tuesday evening in March of that year when Al was carrying groceries and Raymond was coming down with a bag of trash, and the stairwell was too narrow for both. Raymond held the railing and let him pass and said, as Al went by, "You were in that thing at the Cherry Lane last month." Al said yes. Raymond said, "The script didn't deserve you." Al stopped on the stairs. Raymond continued down with his trash bag. After that, they talked most evenings. Raymond had a habit of standing outside his door after dinner to smoke a cigarette he rolled himself, and Al developed the habit of being in the hallway at the same time. Raymond talked about what 31 years of reading other people's letters had taught him about the gap between what people wrote and what they meant. He said most human communication was the management of that gap. He said the actors who understood this were the ones who lasted. They were not performing the lines. They were performing the distance between the lines and the truth underneath. Al Pacino had been at the actor's studio. No one had said it to him like that. That October, with the show closing and the rent coming due, Al knocked on Raymond's door and asked him to read something. A monologue he had been developing. Raymond sat in his single armchair, and Al stood in the center of the room and performed it. Raymond listened with his eyes closed. When it was over, he said, "You're explaining it. Stop explaining it. The character already knows it. Let him know it without showing us that he knows it." Al performed it again. Raymond nodded once. That was the only note he ever gave twice. A month later, Al Pacino auditioned for The Godfather. He has spoken in interviews about that audition, about the stillness, about the decision to play it quiet when everyone expected loud. He has never said where he learned that the most powerful thing a performer can do is let the character know something without showing the knowing. He wrote Raymond a letter in 1972, the year after The Godfather opened. He wrote it by hand because he thought it was what the occasion required. He did not know Raymond's forwarding address. He sent it to the West 46th Street building with a note to the super asking him to pass it on. He never received a reply. He assumed the letter had not arrived. He assumed Raymond had moved on, or passed, or simply not wanted to respond. He let the thread go the way you let threads go when following them requires more than you currently have. He did not know that Raymond Cole had died in the spring of 1971 at a hospital in the Bronx, 6 months before The Godfather began filming after a stroke in his apartment. He had no children. A niece in New Jersey handled the estate and boxed his belongings. Among them was a letter, still in its envelope, addressed to Raymond Cole from someone named Al Pacino. The niece placed it in a box marked miscellaneous correspondence and stored it in her basement for 52 years. The niece died in 2019. Her son, going through the house, found the box. He was 37 years old and not careless, and when he opened the envelope and read the letter and understood what he was reading, he did not throw it away. He found a Tonight Show researcher through a contact at a New York production company. The letter had arrived at West 46th Street in 1972. It had simply never been opened. Al Pacino did not know any of this before the taping. Behind the scenes, Al Pacino had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. His team had been contacted 2 weeks before the taping and told only that a piece of correspondence connected to his early years in New York had surfaced, and The Tonight Show would like to share it with him on air. His team had asked what the correspondence was. They had been told only that it was from 1969 and that it concerned his work. Al had said, "Don't tell me what it says." He had said, "I want to read it the way you read anything you weren't expecting." Cold. He had not expected it to be his own handwriting. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Al Pacino walked back onto the set. He had been gone 4 minutes and 11 seconds. He walked back from the wings at the same pace he had left, deliberate, contained, and sat back down in the chair. His eyes were dry. His hands were steady. He picked up the photocopy of the letter from the desk and looked at it once more, and this time he read it all the way through, without stopping. Jimmy Fallon did not speak. The audience did not move. When Al finished reading, he set the paper down carefully, parallel to the edge of the desk, and looked at Jimmy. "I wrote this," he said. "I wrote this in 1972, and I sent it to a building on West 46th Street, and I thought it never arrived." "It arrived," Jimmy said. "He never read it." "No." Al Pacino was quiet for a moment. "He died before it got there?" 6 months before. Al looked at the paper on the desk. "I told him in this letter that the note he gave me, the one note he gave me twice, I used it in the audition. I used it in the film. I told him that the thing he said in that apartment on West 46th Street was the thing." "I know," Jimmy said. "We read it. He never knew." "No," Jimmy said. "He never knew." In the fourth row, a man of 37 stood up slowly. Raymond Cole's great-nephew. He had driven from New Jersey that morning with the original letter, still in its original envelope, the postmark from 1972, still visible on the upper right corner. He held it out toward the stage. Al Pacino looked at him for a long moment. He stood up from the chair, stepped down from the stage, and walked to the fourth row. He took the envelope from the man's hands and held it the way you hold something that has been in transit for 52 years and has finally arrived. Questlove stood up from the kit without setting down his sticks, which clattered onto the floor behind him, and nobody laughed. The director did not cut to commercial. The camera operator closest to the stage did not pull back. "What was his name?" Al said to the man in the fourth row. His voice was barely above a whisper, but the microphone on his lapel was back in range. "Raymond," the man said. "Raymond Eugene Cole." "Raymond," Al said. He said it the way you say a name you have not said aloud in a long time and are surprised to find it still fits in your mouth exactly as it did before. He rolled his own cigarettes. He had one armchair. He said most actors explain the thing instead of knowing the thing. The man in the fourth row nodded. He talked about the theater. My mother said he talked about it his whole life. She said he always thought one of them was going to make it somewhere. Al Pacino looked down at the envelope in his hands. He was right, he said. He just didn't know which one. Jimmy Fallon, standing at the edge of the stage, turned away from the cameras for a moment. When he turned back, his eyes were wet, and he didn't try to do anything about it. The standing ovation began somewhere in the middle of the audience and moved outward like a wave until every person in the building was on their feet. Al Pacino didn't look up to receive it. He stood in the fourth row aisle with the envelope in both hands and his head slightly bowed, the way a man stands when he is in the middle of something that belongs to someone else. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Raymond Eugene Cole was born in the Bronx in 1903 and worked for the United States Postal Service for 31 years. He had no obituary in any newspaper. He was survived by a niece, a modest collection of American drama in paperback, and a fourth-floor apartment on West 46th Street that was rented to someone else within a month of his passing. The letter sat in a basement in New Jersey for 52 years. It traveled from a fourth-floor walk-up in Midtown Manhattan to a postal sorting facility to a building super to a cardboard box to a basement and finally, on a Monday night in front of 300 people, to the hands of the man who wrote it. Al Pacino kept the envelope. His office says only that it is somewhere safe. Some letters take 50 years to find the person they were always meant for. Some of them were written by that person all along.